now we got trouble. Yes.
I am president of Color for YouTube
Yeah,
Bill Sames.
that's what he said.
There's my buddy Patrick McCrae.
Where?
Hey, Alan Gallant. We're here to review the movie The Shawshank Redemption. A lot of great actors in this movie.
Sure.
And so, no, great cast.
Once
Got,
again, cheap exploitation fluff, Jewel.
Tim Robbins, Morgan Freeman, Bob Gunton, William Sadler, Clancy Brown is in this thing. Gil Bellows,
Jeffrey
James-
DeMunn.
Mhm.
I love that guy. He's in it.
When did you? Well, first of all, before I get started, let's see. When did this? Yeah, I'll make sure. This came out in 94. Yeah, so they had two different release dates, except for the TIFF. That's the Toronto International Film Festival, September 10th, 1994. For the United States, September 23rd, 1994. This was distributed by Columbia Pictures, but the production company was Castle Rock Entertainment.
Mm-hmm. Named after the town in the Stephen King novel.
Yes.
Their first movie was Stand By Me. That's why.
Yes.
Okay.
Good movie. Good movie.
I love you.
I love you too. When did you guys first see this movie, Alan?
The second release after the nominations. So when was that? 95? Sometime early 95, maybe. I don't remember when it was. Late 94, early 95.
Cool. Patrick, when did you see this?
Sometime, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I have a very low tolerance for soaring triumphs of the human spirit, and there's only so many quiet ways one can overcome insurmountable odds through the power of hope and friendship that this guy's going to take,
Right.
because I have standards. So I avoided it. There's one of these movies I had a beef against, because it came out right at the same time as Quiz Show and Ed Wood. And Ed Wood was a movie very close to my heart, and still is, and a movie I've been looking forward to for a long time. I read a stolen script from Disney long before it came out. I was a big fan of the book. It was based on Nightmare of Ecstasy.
Right.
And why is it that a guy dressed up like Andy Dufresne gets all my awards? Because I was my first year of graduate school, and all they could talk about was Quiz Show and this. And I was like, you can see a third movie. You can see Natural Born Killers and Pulp Fiction. You can do
Absolutely.
both.
Well, Pulp Fiction
And
was also floating around.
and they all really enjoyed Ed Wood, years later. But yeah, so it took me a while, and it was uplifting, whatever, and gave me a new dimension on why life is worth living, which I'll never forgive it for.
Right.
But there you
Having
have
too many
it.
options, right, to live.
Yeah, it's typical, typical sleazy grindhouse hope exploitation.
It is hope.
It's a fine film, of course. It's a very good movie.
Yeah. It is hope exploitation, actually.
It is hope exploitation. Yeah.
It's interesting. I've divided it into 4 parts. The first part is hopelessness, because it is.
That's the part I identify with.
The first quarter of this movie is hopelessness. Then
Yeah.
it's survival. Then it's community and friends, and then it's hope.
Yeah, the real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
saw this about 1997 on television.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
I mean, it one of the ways that it became even more lauded and more popular was cable, because it's made the rounds perpetually for almost 30 years.
And it has that IMDb distinction also. It may still have it of being the most lauded, highest scoring movie in all of IMDb.
Heavy rotation since like 96 or something.
Yeah.
And I like how AMC debuted this when they did debut it, because they debuted it next to a movie they had already shown throughout the years, which was Escape from Alcatraz, which was very smart to do.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think I'd already seen Morgan Freeman in Unforgiven prior to this.
Yeah,
Seven. He did
Unforgiven
Seven.
came out like 2 years before, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 years. I mean, 2 years in the order of release.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and he's great in that. This is an interesting movie for me because a lot of movies that use heavy narration are covering up enormous flaws,
Yeah,
and
but not this.
this one is not
intrinsic.
doing that. It's using the strength of Stephen King's writing or a similarity to his writing to tell the story, and it works really well. I remember hearing the story that Freeman was not comfortable doing that much narration because there's a general prejudice against heavy narration in films. It's like, you usually you tell the story visually. You don't have all this exposition and it's not done, blah, blah, blah. And it's usually not, or it's done sparingly when it is. And there are a couple of narrations in this movie that they're not so great, but 90% of it is fantastic. It just works really well.
How do they talk Freeman into it? They just say it's in your contract.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that Darabont, I think everybody respected his ability to tell story based on the script, based on what his vision was for the script, because there's so many brilliant scenes in this film, just absolutely brilliant scenes. It is a prison film, but it has way more depth than your average prison film, and it has a lot more to offer in terms of humanity, I think, than your average prison film. Some other prison films are very good, but typically prison films, especially in their heyday in the 1950s, it's like Riot on Cell Block, yada, yada. And they were kind of exploitation films to start with. Lots of, here's an excuse for violence, here's an excuse.
I was fooled into watching this movie with the promise it was a remake of Stir Crazy with Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. I was let down.
With none of the jokes.
They should have kept Grossberger. Yeah. He was a great character. Jewel,
Yeah.
you remember Grossberger?
What's that?
Jewel, do you remember Grossberger? Stir Crazy? You'd love him.
I've never seen Stir Crazy.
That's a good trailer. Don't watch the movie. It's a good trailer.
Yeah.
Oh my god. That's pretty funny. So I first saw Tim Robbins in a little movie called what was it? Jacob's Ladder.
Jacob's Ladder,
which is really, really great movie.
Yep.
What's the first Tim Robbins movie you saw? Was it this or?
It was the best movie Tim Robbins has ever been in, which was Network. He plays one of the assassins at the end of Network.
That's
He's one of the guys who shoots Howard Beale.
Very young. He's like ridiculously young. He's like 20 or something. But yeah, I would say the best film or the first film that I ever saw Tim Robbins in, not realizing I saw him in Network, that was probably the first.
Yeah, I mean,
I realized I saw him in was probably Bull Durham.
That's what I remember him the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, and at that point, I didn't have anything to compare him to, so I didn't realize what a fine actor he really was.
He has the funniest line in that movie, though. He has the funniest line in that film where he accuses Edith Piaf of being Mexican. He says, "I know you're listening to that Mexican singer in there."
Bull Durham, great baseball.
It's one of the trilogy of the so-called baseball movies with Field of Dreams and then For Love of the Game.
Yeah.
Really, not a League of Their Own.
No, that's not part of the trilogy because it doesn't have what's his name starring in it.
Kevin Costner?
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Kevin Costner did make those baseball movies.
Yep.
Yeah, I think he made another baseball movie where he was a pitcher for the Detroit Tigers.
That's For the Love of the Game. That's the last one he did, where his last game he pitches a perfect game.
I think the purpose of that movie was to convince studios that Sam Raimi could make a film and not go nuts. And that's how he gets, no, seriously. And I think that's how he got Spider-Man.
It's entirely possible. I mean, obviously, being able to make a film without going nuts is a strength.
But it has that mythic,
Yeah.
dignified quality that
It
Spider-Man has.
It
really does.
Yeah,
Spider-Man's a beautiful movie.
It does. The way the scenes are constructed, and there's a soar of heroism that happens in both those films.
And I think just the visual language. They both are very sun-dappled movies.
The first movie I saw Tim Robbins in was Jacob's Ladder. I was 10, and that is not a movie I recommend watching at 10 years old either. But great movie.
Yeah, I saw Jacob's Ladder around the same time as I saw Bull Durham. I think probably within 6 months. But yeah, it's a great movie. It's fantastic.
What's your first Morgan Freeman movie you saw, guys?
It wasn't a movie. It was TV. It was Electric Company.
Yeah,
he was Easy Reader. Yeah.
And actually, it's funny because they did an Easy Reader Halloween costume. So if you were a little kid, and you wanted to go to Halloween as Pimp Daddy, you could do it and say, "Oh, it's the Easy Reader," because it really.
I would just show up to school, and they would accuse me of being in an Easy Reader costume, and it wasn't. That was the weird part.
Bell bottoms and the floppy hat. And
Sure. 1989. I'm still at it.
Cutting edge.
Lean on Me was the first movie I saw which oddly enough, they played a double feature of Morgan Freeman, though I wouldn't consider Brubaker or necessarily
a great movie, though.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Brubaker's good. It's really
good. I wouldn't consider it necessarily a Morgan Freeman movie. He's in it.
He stars in very few films, though. I mean, there are very few movies. Say, oh man, you got to see this Morgan Freeman movie. Yeah. Even though it would be great, he's always paired up with someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like a you don't have Pinot Noir for dinner. Well, I don't anymore. This week, but it pairs well with other things. Yeah. Morgan Freeman and Chateaubriand.
Right.
So this is based off the Stephen King novel, Shawshank Redemption.
It's a novella. It's a short.
Yeah. And it's in different seasons.
Yeah. It's from different seasons.
Which has Stand By Me in it, which was called The Body, just like this is called Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you guys think? Tim Robbins, obviously, and Morgan Freeman have great chemistry. What did you guys think of their chemistry in this movie?
It's terrific.
Yeah, it is.
It's effortless.
I mean, they establish a connection with. I mean, the connection is there, and I mean, it's in the script, but it's literally there chemically from the time he walks into that prison.
Yeah.
It's just there. I mean, it's written to be there because it's like, okay, I'm going to bet on this guy being the first one to crack. Ha ha ha! Yeah. Tall drink of water, he calls him. You call somebody a tall drink of water when they're attractive to you?
Well, he's been in prison a while.
Yeah. Although he wasn't one of the sisters.
If I had cast this, all seriousness aside, if I had cast this according to the book, I would have cast Colm Meaney.
Yes, because it's supposed to be a white, red-headed dude.
Yeah, he's Irish. That's why he's called Red.
Right. Yep.
Yeah,
and Colm Meaney would have been great.
Absolutely would have been great. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because Red goes, I'm Irish. That's why they call me Red.
Well, he was thrown into weird psychic prisons in DS9 every other episode. I mean, he suffered constantly on that show.
Yes.
That's true. It's not an episode of DS9 unless Colm Meaney's getting
unless Miles is in serious suffering. that poor man. I mean, it's like Job, that guy.
No, that's who should have played Jigsaw in Sawmill. It's Colm Meaney.
That's interesting, actually.
It
would be interesting because it would be casting him against type in some ways. I mean,
Tobin Bell is just such a great LA actor. You
Yeah.
know, and then he got this. He's like Richard Fancy or somebody that you just want to see get a part
Right.
in something, and he finally did.
Yeah. And it made his bank account. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he got a great deal of mileage out of that series, which is fantastic for him. I'm always rooting for good actors that don't quite get what they deserve. You know?
And he is a good actor. I mean, the only mixed blessing in that is that it's the only thing he would really get, and so we didn't get the benefit of seeing Tobin Bell in a lot of other stuff. And he's so good.
No, I know. I you know, the weird thing is, before all of that, you saw him in a ton of things, but it's all brief stuff, guest starring roles, this, that, and the other thing. And you just like many character actors, you just say, that face, what's his name?
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of like that. So
he actually did a voiceover role for the MacGyver reboot because James Wan, who did help wrote and he directed Saw as well. They made the traps in the movie basically MacGyver could get out of them. They sort of idolized Richard Dean Anderson's character growing up, and so that's why Tobin Bell he's basically voicing Jigsaw, but it's a different character name in the show.
Right.
Which is cool. But yeah, Tobin Bell's a great actor. So I really love Clancy Brown in here.
He's wonderful.
It's weird because I was watching interviews with him and he said he blew his audition. He felt he did not. He thought
all the time when
didn't know how he got the part there for a moment.
Yeah.
He was given an interview going, yeah, I really messed up on the audition. Yeah, he goes, I didn't think I was getting cast.
He's like Ron Perlman's good-looking brother.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. He's also sweeter natured. Ron Perlman is a very opinionated, aggressively political kind of guy.
You'd never guess
really
it.
is. He's
You'd
like
never guess it.
F that. It's like, you know, he's totally that way. But yeah, and Clancy Brown is like really even when he's in interviews and stuff. He's totally
Jewel, there's a show we've been talking about. You need to see. There's Carnival. See the whole thing. And boy, is Clancy Brown good in that.
He's wonderful.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's his best work. I mean, he really owns that series.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. He's a true believer. He's a zealot. But he's also he literally a carrier of evil.
He's the ultimate Trask.
Yeah, totally. Adrienne Barbeau has a great role in that too.
Oh, she's so good,
fantastic in it.
Yeah.
You really get to see the fact that she also had acting chops, but I mean, should have known that by the fact that she'd been on Broadway, etc. You know, but she was a stage actress.
It's
really
good. Every episode is just this wonderful little mystery that and yet you feel fulfilled by the end of each of these episodes.
It sort of got that sort of mysterious off balance feeling that Twin Peaks has. You know, it's
not in the era of Shawshank Redemption. It's not in the era of Green Mile, but it vaguely feels like it could have fit in those universes.
Yeah, just a few years later. Just a few years. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it has a patina about it that's, what is it, set in like the 30s or something?
Dust Bowl.
Yeah, 30s.
It's Dust Bowl. I think it's 30s or it's
30s. Yeah.
Because there are just hints of Nazism on the rise, and that, you know, Hitler's getting a hold of some of these artifacts, and but there's still a strong memory of World War I.
Yes, because there are veterans kicking around that are in the carnival and so on. Yes,
and the flashbacks. There's constant flashbacks of World War I and weird stuff they found in the trenches, and it's really good. I forget how good that show is.
Jewel, it's very supernatural. It's got all this.
It would be right up your alley. So it's like Dust Bowl, Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
You guys talked about the narration in this. Other Stephen King films narration, Lean on Me, Stand By Me, and Storm of the Century has narration in it as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
This is not the only Stephen King novel that got made into a movie that has narration.
Yeah.
I think with narration is as long as the storyteller doesn't tell you too much of what's like narrating the movie, because what would the point be? And he's really not. He's more just. I love how he's more painting the prison life as it is for people who are
Sure.
just coming in.
Yeah. There is a style to the prose that is very nice. It's immersive. The style of the prose as well is kind of important.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it really is. If it's not Stephen King really owes Frank Darabont a beer for making him sound so good.
Yeah, absolutely. The entire cast of this movie is perfect in my estimation. I mean, even the background prisoners are great. The faces, the character in the faces, and everything. It's just
here's an example of how the faces are so good. The photo at the end of the movie of them holding up the hammer. If you look at the background faces, they all look like they came right out of a newspaper of that era. I mean, it's just perfect.
Yeah. It's fantastic, and the subtlety of the you get a subtlety of the change of styles through the decades, because you're inside of a prison where everything is kind of suspended, but you still get little subtle things that tell you, oh, we're in the 50s now, or we're in the 60s now. So that I thought that was really well done.
Well, just Rita Hayworth giving over to Raquel Welch.
The posters, from Rita to Marilyn to Raquel, and then having the kids show up in the 60s. It's total. I mean, he looked like my brother. My oldest brother looked like that in the late 60s when he was a teenager, when he was like graduating high school. Same kind of hair, wore the same kind of clothes, the whole thing. So that was kind of like, oh yeah, that's a juvenile delinquent from the 60s.
What did you guys think? I like how Tim Robbins, they're tarring the roof, and Tim Robbins' character, Andy Dufresne, he's listening to Clancy Brown's character talk about his wife, talk about the money he just received from his dead brother.
Oh yeah,
he's not going to get the
taxes.
Yeah, and he walks over, and freaking Clancy Brown is like this big dude. He grabs him, and you're gonna have a little accident. You're gonna go off the roof. And he's like, "There's no reason you can't keep that money." It's just the fun part.
It is. It's absurd, and the response of all the, it's like every time he looks up from his mop, they're doing, they're putting the asphalt, the tar, or whatever it is on the roof. Every time he looks up from his mop, Red is like, "What are you doing? You're going to get thrown off this damn roof." You can see it in his eyes. But the fact that he appeals, and this is all good communicators should do this when they're trying to persuade, appeal to benefits.
Yeah.
Appeal to benefits, and that's exactly what he does. He's a smart Andy Dufresne is a smart man. He, even under pressure, he knows what he needs to do. And he's under a lot of pressure. The pressure and timeline is fantastic towards the end of the whole thing. That's great.
Yeah.
And I think that the timing of the suddenness of the revelation of the escape, I think it's a masterpiece, because everything seems so low.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a low point, you think, in his life, and it has the suddenness that it would have for the people in the prison.
Right.
It has that suddenness for the audience.
Yes, and I think the reason is because Robbins really turns over the idea in Andy's head in those previous scenes, where he hasn't really fully made up his mind yet, until maybe just after he says, either get busy living or get busy dying. And before that point, he is depressed. He's incredibly depressed. Mm-hmm. He has this vision of doing all these things, and nobody will validate that for him, because he's in a prison where everybody's been in there for a long time, And it's just, don't do this to yourself. Don't do this to yourself. And so it plants the seed that he's going to do something to himself. But in his actual mind, he's trying to rebel against that depression and that hopelessness, and hope. Keep pushing it, even saying it while you're not totally feeling it.
Yeah. I like too how they build the plot of this game, not just through Andy, but through the other prisoners, like Haywood giving them the rope.
Yeah.
And they're criticizing him because they remember what happened with Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, no, Andy wouldn't do that, because they think he's going to hang himself in his cell. And they're like, no, Andy wouldn't do that. And Red's so concerned. He does not, look like he sleeps that night. He says that night was the longest night of his life, which is a great narration by Freeman. Because you see the action of his hand on his head, like, my God, don't. He's hoping he doesn't, which is just great work by Freeman as Mike gets.
The irony of Brooks' last act, which is kind of is a hopeless act. Suicide usually is a hopeless act. Not always, but usually. Is ironic because it begins the period of hope. It begins the period of hope because Red ends up in the same room. He ends up carving his name right under Brooks's, but at that point, he knows he's leaving because he's not going to be able to make it there. But there is Zeo Watanabe for him. He has a place to go.
Yeah. What did you think, Patrick? I'm sorry.
Of what specifically?
Of the scene where they're plotting, where they're sort of plotting the escape, and you get the things from the other prisoners, like Haywood, where he says he gave Andy rope, and they're criticizing him for it because they don't know if he's going to hang himself or not. What did you think of that?
It was wonderfully suspenseful in its own way. I mean, it's more gooder than many scenes in other films. You guys really said it. It winds the mechanism perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That whole thing with him sitting in his cell in the dark with the coiled up rope in his fist, and he's just sitting there. And then it cuts to the next day, and then they do a flashback to explain it so as not to ruin that moment.
Oh,
it's great.
It's for you.
No, but my phone probably will ring during this podcast. I wouldn't be shocked. It's done that before. So,
there's a little switch on the side.
Yeah, I do. See, I don't know. I never suspect when my friend's going to call, but he sometimes does unexpectedly.
Yeah.
So,
we've all got those late night friends.
Yeah. Halloween fans. Again, I really loved how they plot the escape, but that and how he explains, because this is before before the young man gets there, he explains how the warden will never get caught because they'll just change the figment of his imagination. And he's explaining this to Red in the library. And you've already got a sense of how smart Andy is, but it's just criminally, like, Jesus.
Oh yeah. I mean, the way he sets him up. Once he realizes what's happened to Tommy, that's the inciting incident that makes him decide. Because obviously the tunnel is probably ready by this time. He's just trying to figure out when it's a good time to do it. And this is it. Like, I'm out of here, and I'm going to take the warden with me when I go.
Yeah.
So,
which has such a perfection to it. There's no business left undone.
mm-hmm. And I think in the film they treat that whole comeuppance of the warden actually better than the story. The story just has him like resigning and going away, and this has him bearing full fruit of his labor.
Goes out like Raymond Massey in Fountainhead.
Yeah.
Kablam.
I think it makes more sense him killing himself, considering all the religious stuff he's like preaching on the, inmates and stuff. Because
Oh yeah, that's the whole hypocrisy and irony of what happens to him.
Yeah, and the actor has played other sort of. He plays a really interesting heel in the movie Broken Arrow with Christian Slater.
Yes.
So he's been heels before, and he does a really good job playing a heavy. He also plays a baby face in the in the show Monk. He plays Trudy's dad.
Yes.
For those who don't know.
He has always remarked how he is always remembered for this role in Shawshank, though. He's always remarked that.
Well, he again has one of those faces that just seems to be made for those glasses, made for that era.
Haircut, the whole
thing.
Yeah. It's from the moment he says your ass belongs to me at the beginning of it, you understand what this guy is about. Yeah. He's of the gospel of cruelty.
Yeah.
He's going to prove it over and over again.
Yeah.
Oh, there's where the cat went.
Yeah, I dropped it. Oh,
Sorry.
You're all right.
No, it's good.
You're good.
I'm interrupting you.
No, I'm just
no. Jewel was actually wishing you would appear.
I
was just saying that to us.
Have you?
I was just hoping you were okay.
You sort of the intrusion of reality is
He
always.
just said, "I miss my wife." He said, "I miss my wife. I wish you would."
Oh my god.
You don't love me no more.
Uh-oh.
Oh my
We're in
god.
big trouble now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Julie, Alan and I were saying the same things about ourselves to Jewel.
It's true.
A moment ago.
Heartbreaking.
I'm so in love.
And they never found my body ever again. So
He won't buy us posters of Sydney Sweeney to put up on the walls that were
Sydney Sweeney.
through.
You saw the Sydney Sweeney Genie commercial, I think.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. No, I'll send you those posters of Raquel Welch. Yeah,
Oh, sure. Yeah, one's from 1 million BC. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Miss Furry Britches.
Yeah, she was in some westerns too.
Bandolero.
Yes, Bandolero and what is it? 100 guns or
1,000 rifles.
1,000 rifles. That's it.
Yeah, and hey, she was D'Artagnan's love interest in the Three Musketeers. So.
Constance,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yes, that's right. She was.
Let me think. I'm trying to think. I don't really have questions. You guys have some.
What's your favorite scene?
What happened? What?
What's your favorite scene?
Yeah, what's your favorite scene? Sorry.
My favorite scene is the scene where he's in the office, he has locked the door, and he is playing the duetta from The Marriage of Figaro, and the entire yard stops, turns, and listens. Many of them with their eyes closed. That's considered one of the great filmmaking scenes of that era, and certainly one of Darabont's best. I love that scene. That scene it does what you said before about, damn it, the soaring hope of humanity. There it is, right there.
Yeah, Patrick.
Oh, I think the denouement, just the revelation of the escape attempt and the crawling through the river and just the satisfaction of seeing those things happen.
Yeah. He really does. Darabont really does that. He gives the audience what they need to have.
Yes.
In those moments.
He's a very generous filmmaker.
Yeah.
All the cool scenes we did get, but there's so many. But I really love when from Andy Dufresne wanting the rock hammer and Freeman saying, "What do you want to do? Kill somebody with it, sink it in someone's skull?" And he's like, "No, sir, I have no enemies here." He goes, "Give it time. Give time." He goes, "I hear the sister's taking a liking to you." He goes, if they catch you with it, and they do, and you drop my name, we'll never do business again. And you get the idea that Red is very serious about it.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, "What are you going to try to do? Break out of here with it?" and he laughs. He goes, "You'll get the joke once you see it." And I do love that he sees it and goes, "Okay."
Yeah.
Mm.
And it isn't until later that Dufresne gets the idea to actually use it.
Yeah.
do
Well,
that.
he's just writing his name on
Right,
the wall,
and
you
he
see it.
chunks out a big hunk of the concrete out of that. But that scene is really good. You're right, Jewel, because it's an important scene in the development of their relationship and the trust that develops between them.
Yeah, and Red's left-handed too in this, which is fun for me. So I'm a lefty, so
Yeah.
Princess Bride reference.
What's that?
I am not left-handed. Princess Bride reference.
Yeah, yeah, great movie. Another one. Who's your favorite
its moments.
character in this movie?
I mean, Red. Yeah, Red or Andy. I mean, this is a movie that very clearly puts the emphasis where it should be. Where
Right.
the best character is not some side character. No, it's the lead characters.
Right, and they are equals among great
Um,
performances. They're equals among really good performances. There.
I remember the question I have. Is Brooks a nod to the Birdman of Alcatraz, even though this isn't set in Alcatraz?
I think that a whole thing with Brooks and Birds is to show that he is an empathetic, kind person. And that he's been there for a long, long time, and he deserves more than he's had in his life, and he's given more than he gets. To take these little birds and raise them, and so that they don't starve if they've fallen out of the nest, things like that is a commentary on kindness and humanity that Brooks has, which is why they memorialize Brooks in a lot of different ways in the picture. He has his name put on the new library that Andy's been working on. He becomes the inspiration for a different path for Red. So he becomes a celebration of life in a lot of ways.
Yeah. From how small the library grows to how big it gets.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the best prison library in New England by the time Andy's done with it. So, pretty cool.
Here's a fun question. What's the first Hank Williams song you ever heard?
I think the first one I ever heard was "Why Don't You Love Me Like You Used to Do." I used to get a lot of Hank Williams songs, and sometimes they were covers, and I didn't know they were Hank Williams songs. But when I was a kid, there was country music around the house, as well as rhythm and blues and rock and roll and all sorts of stuff. So, yeah.
Patrick?
The theme to Shaft.
Actually, when I was growing up,
before or after Hank turned into a black man, a large black man.
It's what did it.
When I was a kid, my grandparents used to listen to a lot of AM radio, and they would play the Shadow radio stuff on the AM. So I'd listen to that, but they would also play old music. Mm-hmm. And the first and only Hank Williams song I ever heard was Hank Williams' "Kalijah."
Kalijah, yeah. Cigar Wooden Indian, yep.
Oh my God.
Kalijah.
I've heard this movie didn't do well at the box office, but it is
initially it was a disappointment, but then after the awards nominations came out, they re-released it and it did very well.
Yeah, which is smart. This movie's definitely a 10. Guys, what do you give it?
Oh yeah, I give it a
10. Easily. I mean, yeah.
I give it a 10 in several categories.
The 90s is sort of underrated as a decade for movies, and with everything culminating in 99. But this is really one of Hollywood's last great movies.
It's a fine movie. I think if Darabont is known for nothing else, this and The Green Mile would suffice. He could
Yeah.
flop everything else, and he hasn't. And they're also the two best films of Stephen King's work, other than Stand By Me.
And The Mist,
And The Mist.
also a Frank Darabont movie.
That's right. That's right. And I will say that one other Stephen King production that was really good, but it was made for TV, was the Stand miniseries. That they basically put together a great film cast.
Oh, good.
I think the one,
television.
even though it got remade, I think if the original It would have got to go to theaters and got the movie money instead of television money,
Mm-hmm.
it would get, because it was a great miniseries.
It was.
That, I would say, obviously The Storm of the Century is a great film. My personal favorite Stephen King novel that got made into a movie, The Dead Zone, obviously, Christopher Walken.
It's really good.
It's awfully good. It's
It was
forgotten.
forgotten about that. I wasn't even.
Yeah, and it's one of David Cronenberg's best movies too.
Yeah, it is. The score by Michael Kamen is masterful. The late Michael Kamen, sorry. Because he composed with Metallica for the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra when they did the S&M album. But yeah, it's a great movie, great choice, Alan. What movie do you guys want to do next?
Well, we talked about
We
it.
talked about the In the Shadow of the Moon.
Oh, In the
The
Shadow.
documentary.
Which is on Internet Archive.
Yes, it is. It's an archive movie. So
Cool. Is tomorrow night good?
Yeah, it's good.
should be.
Okay.
If the hurricane gets crazy, I might not be here, but I'm hoping because I've got battery, and so I should be able to be here nonetheless.
God be with you and be safe, Alan, and then everybody in Florida. We are praying for you.
Hunker down, man. We're all good.
Sniff wisely.
That's just crazy. Links to Alan Gallant's YouTube channel, Colin Sport After Dark. Go check him out. It's on YouTube. Links to Patrick McCrae's Dark Shadows, the book Unbound. Go pick it up if you haven't already. It's going to be in the description box. Have a good one, guys.
Bye.